Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be doing the A Book Steve Hasn't Read tag. This tag was created originally by Mayberry Book Club, and a version has been done by Bookish. Both will be linked down below, as well as Steve's response video to Bookish. Now, the Steve that is referred to in the title is BookTube's own Steve Donahue, who is a professional book critic and reads 150 pages an hour for a total of about 8 to 10 hours a day. So he gets a phenomenal amount of reading done, and consequently is probably one of the most well-read people, at least on BookTube, probably in the world. And it would be a fun challenge to see, is there a book Steve Donahue hasn't read? So my version of this tag is going to be science fiction and fantasy. I have 10 science fiction and fantasy books that I wonder, has Steve read, or has he not read? So let's get to it. First up, we have Third Class Superhero by Charles Yu. This is a collection of short fiction. I thought it was mostly okay. My favorite story is My Last Days as Me, which is about a young actor who has so completely identified himself with the role he's playing that his identity is as actor and as character is so tied together that his final days as the character he's playing is an existential crisis. And there are a few other pretty good stories in here, so I'm quite curious if Steve's read this and what he made of it if he had. Next up in another short fiction collection is Dark Mondays by Kage Baker. I think this collection is a little bit better than Third Class Superhero. I really enjoyed The Two Old Women, Portrait with Flames, and Oh False Young Man. I think were my favorites in this collection. Both of them I think are probably due for a reread. So next up is Death's Master by Tanith Lee. Tanith Lee is one of the most famous, influential female science fiction and fantasy writers of the later part of the 20th century. She wrote from, I think, the 70s to the early 2010s. Her work is famous for being incredibly poetic and lyrical. And unfortunately, she, I don't think, ever quite kept the influence she had earlier in her career towards the end. Even though her publisher, I think it's DAW, has recently come out with a re-release of her work. So I don't have Death's Master on its own. I have it in this omnibus edition, which includes Night's Master, Death's Master, and Delusion's Master. And I want to say there's another omnibus that rounds out this overall series. So, anyway. Definitely, if you haven't read Tanith Lee's Tales of the Flower Earth, definitely check it out. Especially Death's Master, which of the two I've read, I've also read Night's Master. Death's Master is definitely much better. Okay, next up we have The Sorcerer of the Wildeeps by Asante Wilson. So this is one of the early Tor.com novellas, and it's about a young man, Demane, who has some form of superpowers, who's the sorcerer of the title, who's joined a caravan, journeying from an oasis to a southern kingdom, and amongst the guards of the caravan is a character called the captain, who Demane falls in love with, and they have a relationship while they're en route to this their destination. Now, to get from the oasis to the southern kingdom, the caravan has to go through an enchanted, haunted forest, and there is one safe path, but that path gradually changes over time to where the road one travels on might not necessarily be safe anymore. And compounding this danger, there is a monster in the forest who is slowly stalking this caravan. And really fun and interesting book. Next we have Radiance by Catherynne and Valente. So this is an alternate history science fiction novel that posits the solar system as being universally habitable. I mean, in our reality, only Earth is habitable. Excuse me. In the world of this novel, the moon is habitable, Mars is habitable, Mercury is habitable, Venus is habitable, Jupiter is habitable, its moons I think are habitable, Saturn's habitable, so on and so forth. And the novel itself is about a young documentary filmmaker called Percival Unk. I think that was her name. No, Severin Unk. Her father's Percival. Severin Unk, who's a documentary filmmaker who disappeared during the production of her latest film. The Radiant Cars. I keep doing. Does it say? I keep forgetting what the name of the movie is. Somewhere in here. The Radiant Car Thy Sparrows Drew. And this is largely about her father working through his grief by creating a movie to deal with his grief, and also what exactly happened, the social, cultural things of life on the moon, which is in this world Hollywood. So very interesting. So far, my favorite book by Catherynne and Valente. I was tempted to go with the refrigerator monologues, but I really didn't want to start a rant from Steve. Or ignite a rant from Steve. Anyway, so next up we have the Bloodprint by Ausma Zehanat Khan. So this is a relatively recent release. I think it came out about 3 years ago. It's about a group of women fighting against a repressive regime which is threatening to take over the rest of the setting, and in order to strip the regime, this tyrannical group of men, of their power or of their authority, these women who belong to a all-women's society of scholars and warriors are in search of an item called the Bloodprint, which is sort of the only copy of their holy book, which will confer power onto the person who possesses it, or at least can speak it. And this is, I initially had some, when I first tried to read it, I had some issues with it, but then I set it aside and came back to it this year and really, really loved it. And I'm definitely looking forward to reading the Black Con, the sequel to the Bloodprint, in December. Next up we have The 11th Son by Gulong. So this is a Chinese novel. It's part of the, I'm going to mispronounce it, so I'm sorry if I do, wuxia genre, which is basically martial arts, and a very fantastical version of martial arts. And this is about a young bandit who falls in love with one of the greatest female martial artists in this world, and they go on various adventures to prove his innocence of various crimes, dealing with some guy who's obsessed with her, with the Shin, the best female martial artist. And it's really, really good. I mean, it's been, I want to say, a year or so since I've read this, and I definitely need to reread it. Definitely looking forward to it. I think this is the only novel by Gulong in English, so translated into English, which is a shame because I really, really enjoyed it, and looking forward to other work by him being released in the future. And sorry if I'm going out of camera when I put the books up, but I'm putting the books on my bed, and yeah. Anyway, next up we have Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. I know he said he read River of Teeth, but I'm wondering if he's gotten around to Magic for Liars yet. This is a contemporary or urban fantasy novel starring, basically, it's about twin sisters, one of whom is a witch, or mage, as they prefer to be called in this novel, who has gone on to become a teacher. And her twin sister, who is a muggle, who does not have magical powers, and who has gone on to become a private detective. And so the non-magical sister is hired to investigate a mysterious death at the school her sister teaches at. They reconnect, go through all of their sibling drama and conflict, and she eventually figures out several hidden secrets of her sister and of several other suspects in this mysterious death. I mean, I talked about this novel earlier in October, and I didn't care for it. I mean, I thought the mysteries was poorly done, and Tabitha, the detective sister, or is it Ivy, the detective sister? Oh, it's Ivy's the detective sister. Sorry about that. Just really the worst rendering of of a detective ever. It's just like, just really bad. So, I mean, but I did like the school, Gailey's deployment of the magic system, really the school plot, and kind of that more public type school system and all of its attendant problems. Even though it is a kind of a private school, but it kind of read also like a public school, I think. So anyway, so a very mixed bag. Next up we have The Traitor God by Catherynne Johnston. This came out late last year. It's about a mage who has been Edwin Walker, who's been on the run from a crime he doesn't remember committing but knows he did, which was the murder of a god. So in the city, let's see if it has the name of the city. It doesn't on the back. So he's the city he grew up in which is a magocracy. The wizards rule the city. It's protected by, I think, 5 gods. A god of war, a god of death, and then 3 others who protect the city from external threats. And one of them has died and been replaced by a new god. And there's something strange about this new god. There's one of these gods who have remained seem to have gone traitor. Obviously the traitor god of the title, and has encouraged a mage in the Arcanum, the college that rules the city, to ally with enemies of the city empire and overthrow it. Very, very good book. I'm probably giving it a full summary, but it is a really good book. I greatly enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to reading the sequel, The God of Broken Things, again in December. And finally, Katie Edwards' The Last Son. This is a urban fantasy alternate history novel that posits Atlantis' existence and its sort of colonization of the island of Nantucket as New Atlantis, with several old human buildings being magically transported to this new city to give it a sort of mishmash architectural coolness. So basically, this is a novel of Rune St. John, the scion, the heir to the Sun Throne, obviously the last son. He survived, he and his companion Brand survived the fall of the Sun Court and have since become not necessarily private detectives, but more mercenaries for another one of the Arcana, the ruling elite of New Atlantis. And during their work for the tower, he assigns them the search for his missing godson. And in finding the search and rescuing the godson, they discover a threat to New Atlantis, because the people who've kidnapped the godson, Adam St. Nicholas, who is a scion child of the Justice Throne, they've summoned a eldritch abomination which will if left unchecked, destroy the city, and there's other political shenanigans that they're up to. I really love this book. Passionately love it. But I'm also passionately critical of it. And I will probably, I don't know if I'm going to do it today or maybe wait till later, but I'm going to do a long discussion video of this book. It's, I mean, I love it, and I also have issues with it. It's just phenomenal. Anyway, and looking forward to the sequel, which is coming out, The Hanged Man, which is coming out December 17th. At which point, when I get it, I will finish whatever book I'm currently reading at the time. But then after that, I'm going to spend, after that, I'm going to read The Hanged Man. It just cannot wait for that. Anyway, sorry. That was the 10 books I wonder if Steve Donahue has read. Or should it be that I don't think he's read? Whichever. Anyway. Thank you, BookTube. I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.